Welcome to Inside Boxing Daily on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Weekly, or Inside Boxing Daily, is brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation with Alex Ramos and Jackie Richardson. Make sure you check them out on Facebook. Also by Seat Giant, where you can use promo code LEGEND to get a 10% discount on your ticket purchase. And, of course, MyBookie.ag, which will give you up to a free $1,000 cash back bonus on your first sign-up. You can go to mybookie.ag and use the promo code TGT50, or you can go to thegruelingtruth.net and click on the mybookie.ag banner at the top of the page. I am your co-host for Inside Boxing Daily, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I would like to welcome in my co-host, Jeremiah Preisser. How you doing, Jeremiah?
I'm doing well. I'm always doing well, man. Let's talk some boxing.
All right, and if we're going to talk boxing, we might as well talk about people that won't fight each other, but now they might. Deontay Wilder has reportedly been offered $50 million for 2 fights with DAZN. The big thing about this is the second part of this deal. There's a few big things here, but the second part of this deal would be a fight with Anthony Joshua in November or December. Now, the biggest part of this deal is he's still fighting Dominic Brazil, and at least we won't have to pay $64.95 for it. Do you think Wilder will take this deal, or do you think maybe something pops up in the meantime?
Yeah, I did hear that, they walked out of the meeting with John Skipper, just kind of on their toes, not really, giving a definitive answer. So it's hard to say, but seeing as Wilder has had a proposal of $20 million for his first fight, and not only that, Steven Espinoza from Showtime has been awfully quiet lately. My assumption is that he's probably going to go that route, and you couldn't blame him. I mean, if they can actually get him $20 million to fight on DAZN, hell, I mean, he's not making that against anybody else, So you might as well. I mean, I
so
think
it would be $20 million for the Brazil fight.
I think that's how it would work. They said the first fight. That's what they said. So,
okay.
I don't know. I don't know, however, if Wilder has to have his fight against Brazil on Showtime, or I don't know. I don't know how that works. It's kind of tough. But if DAZN has given him $20 million to fight anybody but Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury, I mean, he's just not making that money over on Showtime. So it'd really be hard to say no to him. And I think it'd be a good thing because, again, he's on the same network or, station as Anthony Joshua. So that feels as if that fight would be a bit closer. And I think Eddie Hearn is probably pretty confident that Anthony Joshua can get rid of Wilder if he needs to, and then, build towards a Tyson Fury fight. So I actually think Eddie Hearn would probably rather have Tyson Fury keep winning and build an Anthony Joshua fight, then worry about Wilder and building towards that. I just think a Tyson Fury fight, and I would agree with Eddie Hearn. I mean, it'd be nice to just hear from him and see what he has to think, but that's what I'm thinking. I mean, I would agree with him if that is his line of thought. I mean, Tyson Fury, to me, I think he's more marketable. I think he has better crossover appeal. Again, as I've said a while ago, he's just got more in common with the average dude. And he's just got this bar culture, attitude about him. He's fun. He can joke. And, he can sing really, really well, So
he can sing really, really well. Yeah, but the problem is this. He hasn't sung. He didn't sing after the Wilder fight. I mean, I guess it's because it was a draw. I don't know. But I don't think he sang after the big Sefer-Referee, brawl. But and I still, I don't know if I totally disagree with you or agree with you on how marketable he is, because his style is boring as hell. And no matter how marketable he is, I think that puts a cap on how popular he could possibly be.
Yeah, I think so too. But I just think, as fun as Wilder may seem, I think you and I agree that it just seems like Wilder at some point, he just feels like he's more than likely. I mean, Fury is a better fighter than Deontay Wilder. I mean, I think that was shown in their fight last year. So I just think that not only that, I mean, whether Fury has a lot of crossover appeal in America. I mean, the Brits gonna turn out in droves if you pair Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua. And I think even Americans would appreciate the press conference because Tyson Fury is going to talk a lot of crap to Anthony Joshua. I mean, he's been slandering him, left and right, even when he was semi-retired. When he kept calling him, a puffed-up bodybuilder, and saying Deontay Wilder was a basketball player. I mean, he was talking about how he'd slap them both around, even though when he was, 400 pounds. I mean, I just think, I think his personality, again, I think he's got some crossover appeal just with that. Again, I think you're right. Stylistically, he's not that fun. But, with his story and coming back and whatnot, I think he's grabbed a lot of people's attention already.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I don't see where any of these three are hugely markable. I think Joshua has the potential to it if you could loosen him up a little bit. Wilder, I think, we all know he's going to end up, stretched out on the canvas, getting a 10 count over him sometime in the next year or so anyways. At least that's my guess. So we'll go ahead and move on from that. Gennady Golovkin, looks like his next fight will be Polish fighter Kamil Cesarmeta, 19-0, 4 knockouts. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, but again, what do we expect? I mean,
well, I got no problem with it if they're going to give him Canelo or Jacobs in September. So. Yeah,
well, and that's what it is. I mean, again, I've seen this on the forums and whatnot, and people are like, oh, well, he should be fighting Demetrius Andrade, and I wouldn't mind that fight. I mean, if we're talking preferences, of course, I'd rather have Andrade, but you also have to understand that Golovkin is he's an old dude. I mean, he's looking, for his future. And if he can make $30+ million against Canelo Alvarez, you don't want to risk that at all. I mean, if he were to fight Andrade, and he could lose that fight. I mean, I do think Golovkin could beat him, but at this stage, it's always hard to tell what exactly a guy has. So, yeah, I don't have any problem at all with him saving himself and just pounding this guy out, and then looking forward to Canelo in September. I mean, I've seen the guy fight. I mean, he's got quality boxing skills. I think he had a solid amateur background. He's a good mover. He's not particularly slick, but he is kind of hard to hit. But you look at his record, and as you pointed out, the guy's a non-puncher. I mean, that's just the sort of thing you see constantly in boxing. If you don't want your guy upset, you give him some a softer.
Yeah, because you can control the decision. We know that, Jeremiah.
Exactly. I mean, even if Golovkin has a rough time with this guy, and you never know. I mean, a lot of these Polish fighters have turned out to be pretty damn good in recent years. I mean, Glowacki is pretty good. Silsuki, the guy that Daniel Jacobs fought, that I heard might actually be the next opponent for Demetrius Andrade, who I just mentioned. But, these guys are pretty, rock solid, and a lot of them become pretty good pros in recent years. So, like you said, I mean, Golovkin, he's going to get the nod either way, even if you have a Sturm De La Hoya type situation where, this guy somehow managed to outbox him clear enough. But, to me, it's not a big deal. It was to be expected.
All right. Mike Coppinger today said the rematch between WBC junior middleweight champion Tony Harrison and former WBC 154-pound champion Jermell Charlo is being talked about for June 23 on Premier Boxing Champions on Fox, with the winner taking on the winner of Jarrett Hurd and Julian J. Rock Williams in a unification fight. What do you think about this matchup? I think it's a pretty decent fight. Nothing great. I really had a hard time calling either one of them champions, though.
Yeah, I don't. None of them are champions, I mean, but Hurd is the closest thing you got. I mean, he beat Arislani Lara, who, maybe in a previous era, not when there's only 8 divisions, but when it was just easier to get yourself recognized as champion. You never know. Lara might be. He could have been done, man, at 154 pounds. I mean, he's a skilled guy. But even though he's past his best, he's still shown quite a bit of skill. But I like it. I like it a lot because, Charlo and Hurd, they'd kind of mouthed off to each other in the past. to me, if Charlo wins that fight, he's probably the number 2 guy. Though it's tough to say. Lara's kind of up there with him. But if Charlo wins, you never know. He might get placed in the number 2 position. So you might have a new line with Hurd and Charlo fight one another. And stylistically, I think it's a good matchup. I mean, I think they're both big for the weight. Charlo is obviously a bit more of the boxer. He's got a good jab. And he can move around a bit, whereas Hurd's just a big guy. He's rough. He throws a lot of combinations. He's a good body puncher. I just think it meshes well. If that would be for a new line, to create a new champion, I think that's a good one. I like it. I mean, when Hurd taking on, J-Rock Williams. Williams is a good fighter, too. He can box quite a bit, but I don't think he's that big of a threat to Hurd. I mean, eventually I think he gets stopped. But I like it. I think that's the right way to go. And as soon as you have, both guys under a promotional banner, I just think you're good to go there.
All right, this Saturday's fight between Errol Spence Jr. and Mikey Garcia is expected to have a huge crowd at the AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. 25,000 tickets have already been sold for the Spence-Garcia fight, and a large walk-up crowd is expected on Saturday. They think this could threaten the 50,000 that Canelo Alvarez did against Liam Smith in 2016. I think this is a big night for boxing, Jeremiah. I think this is a fight that they have promoted rather well compared to some of the previous fights we've seen. I've watched numerous commercials about it tonight. I think it's a great matchup between two guys that are top 10 pound for pound. What's your take on this matchup? I don't think it's Hearns Leonard, but it's as good as we're going to get nowadays.
Yeah. It's not even Leonard Duran, which I think would be a bit closer, in comparison.
I don't think it would.
Well, I mean, I'm just referencing. I'm referencing, Duran being a lightweight. Garcia
How about let's compare it to
lightweight.
De La Hoya Trinidad, maybe? And I don't think it's as big as De La Hoya Trinidad either.
No. I mean, these fights aren't even. I mean, this isn't even as big as De La Hoya Mosley, in my opinion. I mean, it's a good fight, and it's always tough. I'm always skeptical when they start talking about ticket sales and whatnot, because Al Heyman has been known to discount these things, cheaply, or just give some of them away.
That's why there's going to be a huge walk-up crowd to make it look good.
Yeah. And so I'm a little cautious with those numbers, but I think, when you're talking about the markability, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, when I hop on Twitter, when I hop on Facebook, I mean, it's hard to get away from, the commercials. When you go on YouTube, I mean, a good number of the videos have been in my recommendations, on the side there. So they're doing a damn good job of getting it out in the public eye. And I think that's a damn good thing, because Mikey Garcia is not, he's not the most exciting fighter, but he is a guy who deserves some marketing. I mean, he's well
likable. I mean, I've interviewed him before, and you can find that on thegrilling.truth.net if you punch his name into the search engine. And I mean, he's a nice guy, genuinely a nice guy.
Well, and he generally, and typically, even if he's not getting the knockout, he's typically the one coming forward. He's scoring with power punches. Even against Lipinets, who he couldn't get out of there, he did score a knockdown. So he is a guy who does, provide some excitement. And Errol Spence is obviously that way stylistically as well. So, in terms of marketing, just sticking with that, they've done a hell of a job. And I actually saw PBC on Fox kind of make some fun of it all too, which I like to see from time to time. Granted, it's done right, but they have this like cowboy, singing really high notes as you kind of see the Dallas skyline. So it's pretty funny, but I like it. I'm glad that they're putting it out here in the public's eye. A lot of people are chit-chatting about it. You're starting to see more people. Well, I'm starting to see more people who are giving Garcia a chance. So, just on that thought alone, you're starting to get some half and half type stuff here, though. Obviously, the majority of people are leaning towards Spence, but I like it. I think they're doing a good job, and I think it is good for boxing. We just got to hope that the fight turns out entertaining as well.
Yeah, I think it will. I mean, they're both talented guys. I think we're going to see a fight in this one. I don't know that it'll be on the level of Hagler Hearns or Leonard Duran, but we're going to see a better fight than we normally see, I think. I just wish the undercard wasn't shit, which it is. Earlier today, the WBO ordered Anthony Yarde to lose to 0 on the end of his record, and he will now have to fight Sergey Kovalev. Negotiations for the deadline for the fight are April the 12th. Am I crazy here, or is Anthony Yarde in a lot of trouble?
No, I think he is. I think you're right. I mean, we talked about Yarde because he's, just coming off a performance.
Hey, wait a second. Now, I watched his fight last week on, British TV, and they kept calling him Yarde. So I think his name's Yarde.
Oh, Yarde. Okay. Well, shows how bad we've been getting it wrong. I mean, but anyways.
In my defense, I've been saying Yarde since the last time I saw him fight. So, because they all called him Yarde then, too. But you know what? What do the British know? We kicked their ass in that war, so we could say their names however we want.
Yeah, we've earned that right. Yeah, man, but I think you're right. I mean, I think Yarde, I think he's a good fighter, but it seems like, I don't know, Frank Warren's kind of putting him on the chopping block a little bit. I mean, I know that Kovalev is, he's still past his prime. I know he's still got his vulnerabilities. But I'm just not sure Anthony Yarde is up to the task of exposing that right now. I mean, he does have quick hands and he can hit hard, so you can't discount his chances altogether. But to me, Kovalev is he's just so much more proven. He's got a lot of experience even in this day and age. The fact that he was able to adjust at his age, and just kind of boil his style down, keep it all simple, just touch a guy. It showed a learning curve there that you don't often see with guys of his age. So to me, Kovalev is a very, very good fighter. Again, obviously he's a little past his best, and again, there are some vulnerabilities there, but I just think he's too much for Yarde. I mean, I think he's too technically sound. I think his ring IQ is superior. And I think he has enough punching power to get Yarde out of there as well. I don't know. I think they probably should have waited with Yarde, but it is what it is. If they're mandating it, then this is what we're getting. So I'm siding with Kovalev in that one.
All right. So real quick, we're going to take a little commercial break, and then we're going to come back with On This Day. And on this day is what, Jeremiah?
It is Floyd Patterson against Ingemar Johansson, and it's the third fight.
All right, so we'll be back in 1 minute and 12 seconds.
Hi, I'm Mike Goodpaster from the Grueling Truth Sports Network, and I'm here with just one simple message. If you're watching the games, it's time to start making money. The Grueling Truth has recently partnered with MyBookie.ag, an industry-leading sportsbook website, who reminds you that where you bet is just as important as who you're betting on. And that's why The Grueling Truth urges you to check out MyBookie.ag. In addition to the usual thousands of odds, money lines, proposition bets, and futures offered on MyBookie.ag daily, they also have in-game live betting and a mobile site that makes wagering on the go easier than ever. So join now, and MyBookie will give you up to a free $1,000 cash bonus on your first deposit. Just enter promo code TGT50, that's TGT50, to take advantage of this offer. You can also go to thegruelingtruth.net, click the banner at the top of the page for MyBookie.ag, and also get the same benefit and the same $1,000 free cash bonus on your first deposit. So visit MyBookie.ag, courtesy of The Grueling Truth, and enjoy winning today. MyBookie.ag. You play, you win, you get paid.
All right, guys, we're back inside Boxing Daily. I'm Mike Goodpaster with Jeremiah Preisser. Make sure you check out MyBookie.ag. You can go to thegruelingtruth.net, click on the banner at the top of the page, and it will take you right to the site for up to a $1,000 bonus. All right, guys, on this day, Jeremiah, let it roll.
All right, so this, of course, is the third fight between Patterson and Johansson. This is a fairly noteworthy rivalry. I mean, a lot of people are, well aware of it, and the fact that a lot of these guys traded knockdowns, and they just couldn't seem to handle each other's power. And unfortunately, this is part of the reason why Johansson got out of the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Wholly undeserving, in my opinion. But,
yeah, he was 1-2, and he about the only 3 fights that mattered for him.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think he beat Eddie Macon, which was a good win. But, come on, the resume is sorely lacking. But besides all that, I mean, this was a good series. It was a bit of a surprise to see Johansson put out in the first, see Patterson put out in the first fight, and then Patterson got his revenge. And in this fight, you had a nice kind of recap of the events where, Patterson, I believe, hit the deck twice in the first round. He was able to come back and knock Johansson down at the end of the first. And then, of course, you had the finish in the sixth round, and that pretty much sealed the deal on the whole thing. But, it was one of those things, again, Johansson was a good puncher, like a lot of heavyweights, he had a nice right hand. This fight, however, I think kind of played it, if I'm not mistaken, this, the build-up to this fight kind of played into the lore of, Muhammad Ali. Of course, at this time, he was known as Cassius Clay, and, Johansson used Cassius as one of his sparring partners. And, of course, the word was that Cassius Clay made him look like a sparring partner and jab and dance around him all night. I think one of the other noteworthy things about this fight was, I believe it was on ABC, and I think there was about 15,000 people in the crowd to watch this one, which is pretty good attendance as well. But, it was just stylistically, they seemed to match well. Johansson was not a particularly big heavyweight, even for the day. I mean, he had decent size. But, Patterson, of course, had that, that well-known style, the crouching and the big hooks. And, Floyd Patterson was obviously one of the fastest heavyweights to ever do it. Probably a natural light heavyweight, when you kind of boil it down and look at, maybe where he should have been. But, it was a fun fight. I mean, you don't often get trilogies like this, so, you can't say that. Again, the knockdowns, and they all made it fun, and they're all worthwhile. And, of course, this helped Floyd Patterson, retain his title, and he went on to hold it for a little while until he hit the wall against Sonny Liston.
He hit the floor against Sonny Liston, not the wall.
Yeah, right.
So the third fight, I think the third fight, because I got this not too far back in a trade for boxing DVDs, but I'm pretty sure the third fight was on closed circuit TV.
Yeah, I think it was.
I think it was like ABC Radio, but the only version I've seen of this fight was the closed circuit version.
Okay. Yeah, and they've got a ton of high quality photos for this fight, and but of course it was still a time when boxing was more popular than it is today. But again, stylistically these two meshed well. Patterson himself did not have a great reign. He was a good fighter. I mean, I like watching him because of what he was able to accomplish, and I'm actually more interested, to watch. Just thinking about what he might have been had he stayed at 175 and been able to take the power a bit better. I mean, but funny enough, I have heard that Patterson, it might have been Henry Hascup who told me this, but I saw that Patterson is up there with he's up there with in terms of top 10 ranked contenders defeated. Floyd Patterson is actually up there with the best. When you examine his record, that's actually not that surprising. I mean, even though he was a little guy and he didn't have a great chin, he had a long resume and was able to do it for quite a while. I mean, that's why
but the thing you got to remember about those top 10 guys is it was at a really bad time in the heavyweight division, because when you look at him, he's got 2 wins against Tommy Jackson, which were probably top 10 guys. Archie Moore, who was older than dirt. You move on, Pete Rademacher, I don't think could have been one of those guys because that was his pro debut. Roy Harris, Brian London, Ingemar Johansson. Tom McNeely may have been ranked because I think he was undefeated at the time. And then, of course, he gets blown out twice by Liston. But I think Patterson gets a raw deal because I do think he was a hell of a fighter. And if he would have stayed at 175 or if there was a cruiserweight division, I think it would look at him differently. But when you look at it, he also had 2 wins over Henry Cooper. He beat George Chuvalo in one of the best heavyweight fights you'll ever see in the mid-'60s. I think it was the Ring Magazine Fight of the Year. He beat Eddie Macon, who you talked about when you talked about Ingemar Johansson. He had a couple really close fights with Jerry Quarry. He lost a really close fight to Jimmy Ellis. And of course, he got butchered by Ali. But also, you got a win there, a 10-round unanimous decision over Oscar Bonavena. So when you look at him, I mean, that's not a bad career as a heavyweight, even though I think most people that know what they're talking about always wonder what happens if he stays at light heavyweight.
Well, yeah, I mean, and can you blame him? It's because he was undersized at heavyweight, and he was one of the fastest heavyweights to ever do it. And that's at over 200 pounds. So had he stayed at 175, and he would have been quicker, and again he would have take punches better. I don't know. I mean, have you ever heard a story? Because I'm certainly not a Patterson historian. I mean, to be honest with you, Patterson is not a guy that I'm that fond of, and it really didn't have anything to do with personality. I don't know. He just, he had a sizable reign in terms of title defenses, in length of time, but I just, didn't.
You know what I always wondered? Cus D'Amato trained him and Jose Torres. I mean, correct? Didn't he train Torres? Torres was light heavyweight champion for a while in the 60s. I don't know.
Yeah. Torres had I think Torres had about 2 title defenses at 175, and I think he did train both those guys. So do you think maybe, he kind of just kept them apart? I don't know.
I have no clue. That's just when we were sitting here talking about this, and we talked about why he didn't fight at light heavyweight. My first thought was, D'Amato had Jose Torres at light heavyweight, and there's no way Torres could have fought as a heavyweight.
Yeah. So, I mean, if somebody can, if you're listening now and you can chime in, or, maybe if somebody can tell us why Patterson chose to fight at, heavyweight instead of 175. I mean, because I think everybody sees what, we see, that he would have been better off there. Again, I'm repeating myself at this point, but he would have taken punches better. He would have been a bigger puncher.
Oh, he'd have been a knockout puncher. I mean, he could hit for a heavyweight. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he would have been dynamite.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say he would have been dynamite because not only would his power, have increased. I mean, like he said, he had a good punch even at heavyweight. But I mean, looking at his hand speed at 200 plus, I mean, again, the dude is one of the quickest guys to ever do it. I mean, I think that crouching style, his size, his size would have played better in his favor at that weight. Again, I mean, maybe he goes down as one of the great light heavyweights of all time. It's just. I mean, again, I'd have to look at the competition and see exactly.
We don't know how he fights if he's fighting at 175. Maybe he just couldn't make that weight and be as strong either. You never know. But I never heard anybody answer that question as to why he chose to go to heavyweight. It could have been just the simple fact that you make more money fighting at heavyweight.
Yeah, maybe. And he did end up making some good money. I think against Johansson in the third fight. I could be wrong here again. I'm not looking at box record or any of this stuff, but I think he made about $500,000. Pretty good chunk, size of. I think it was $500,000. Again, maybe I'm mistaken. If somebody can correct me, go ahead. But yeah, maybe it was the case that he just couldn't make 175 and he just decided to stay at heavyweight. It could have been a good number of things. I mean,
go ahead, because I'm going to go to Ingemar Johansson and ask a couple questions, but go ahead and finish up Floyd first.
Okay, yeah. I was just wondering if maybe there's a Floyd Patterson biography out, and it kind of lays this out. I haven't noticed any Floyd Patterson books lingering around, but. Maybe I'll just go ahead and check or, ask one of my historian buddies and see what they have to say.
All right. Now, Ingemar Johansson's a guy that, he beat Henry Cooper. I know he beat Joe Erskine, who I think at the time was ranked because I think his record was something like 40-1 or something. He beat Eddie Macon, who you talked about, who was a good fighter, and he knocked out Eddie Macon, if I remember right. Then you had the 3 wars with Patterson, and then he was pretty much done. I mean, and the thing I don't understand is this. 1963, he knocks out, I think, Brian London, and then he just disappears. And he never lost after the Patterson fight again. His only losses were to Patterson. I always wondered what happened to him and why he just didn't fight anymore. Unless, the 3 fights with Patterson were absolute wars. All 3 of them were wars, where both guys getting knocked down repeatedly. It seemed like maybe that took a lot out of him, or maybe he just realized that he didn't want to do that no more. But it seems weird that he fought 4 times after that, 3 knockouts, beats Brian London. And by the way, Brian London is a name we all know just because a lot of guys that were really good knocked him out. So Brian London is like the Prince Charles Martin of 1963. But have you ever heard anything of why Johansson decided to quit boxing then?
No, I haven't. Again, like Patterson, I mean, I'm even less high on Johansson, so I don't really know. And I mean, I guess if you think about it, I don't know what he did in his post-fight career, but that's kind of a unique status in Sweden. It's there are very few boxers in Sweden as is. I mean, they used to participate before World War II, in good numbers, and some of them ended up doing pretty well. Actually, Johansson himself was a pretty damn good amateur and fought in the Olympics. But it was one of those things like, again, in Sweden, he would be unique in the sense that he was, a fighting guy in Sweden where there are a few of those guys. So a lot of times you make you see what Mike Tyson has become here. And obviously, Johansson is not Mike Tyson, but again, because of his uniqueness, I'm wondering if maybe they gave him TV roles or they had him, on shows or, in music or, I'm just completely unsure. I mean, I don't know much about his career at all. It just seems because of his unique stature, he might have, been able to do all sorts of stuff and kind of stay in the limelight and make some good money off that. But honestly, I don't know.
Okay, now the only thing because I don't know a whole lot about Johansson either, I'll admit to that. And the one thing I do know, the only interesting thing, and that would be a side note, that there was serious talk of Rocky Marciano coming out of a 4-year retirement to fight him in 1959. And I'm pretty sure from what I read, Rocky even went into training camp for a few weeks before just saying the idea was nuts. And the interesting thing here is this. I heard that Lou Duva was actually the guy Rocky Marciano was going to have train him for that fight if they fought.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, after 4 years of not doing it, if you could have come back. And I'm not exactly sure how old Rocky Marciano would have been at the time, but, let's imagine that Rocky Marciano keeps fighting, I mean, Marciano would have been in a pretty weak era after, clearing out guys like Charles.
I think
and
the number
Walcott
one contender when he retired was what? Tommy Hurricane Jackson?
Well, yes. So what ended up happening was Archie Moore, I believe, ended up beating Jackson. I think that's right.
So.
Or maybe.
No, it was Patterson.
It was
Patterson beat him twice before he fought Moore. So I think the Patterson-Johnson fight, the winner was fighting Moore. Archie Moore.
Okay, so maybe that's right. Or maybe it's, I'm trying to think exactly how that played out. But I believe that, who was it? Wasn't it Patterson and Moore who started a new line after Rocky Marciano? Okay, so, they were number 1 and number 2, and that started a new line, which is, I think, pretty incredible thinking about how, long Archie Moore stayed around. But so you would have had Floyd Patterson, as a top contender for Rocky Marciano, and then maybe Johansson later on down the road, or not too long down the road. So that would have been pretty interesting. I mean, I think obviously I think a prime Marciano tunes Johansson up, and it's too big.
I think 80% of Marciano in 1959 probably tunes him up, but I also think this. I can't remember who wrote the biography, but I read a biography on Rocky Marciano, and the fact was he just didn't want to fight anymore. And the way Marciano was, kind of like Tyson, where they were just kind of overwhelming. And I think that when you're that kind of a fighter, I mean, if you lose any of that passion at all, you're very beatable by anybody. And Mike Tyson showed that.
Yeah. And, of course, there's that distinction between Tyson and Marciano where, Marciano was one of those indomitable will guys, who would just come right at you. He was one of those guys who could take it
Yeah, but
and
I'm
dish
just
it.
talking about one of those type of fighters that basically throws everything into everything. And, Marciano was a guy that comes from behind to beat Walcott. There is no comparison. Rocky Marciano was 10 times greater than Mike Tyson could have ever been just because he had too much will. And I think if Rocky Marciano fights Mike Tyson, Rocky Marciano beats him on will alone.
Yeah, well, and I think it's fun to think about Marciano against some of these other heavyweights. You put him in like a 20-round fight or something. I think he's kicking a lot of ass. I mean, the dude he's a real go-getter. But like you said, I mean, I think it was mentally, once he had given it up and figured that he had no more, that was pretty much it. I mean, but of course, after those kind of battles that he had, I think it made it a little bit easier to just kind of hang up the gloves. And he probably would have gotten flipped at some point in time anyways, and eventually lost. But even at that point, I would have probably favored him, against Patterson and probably.
See, I don't think I would have, because the other thing I remember outside of just losing the fire was that he had serious back issues, which was another reason why he retired. So I think those probably get worse by 1959 instead of improving. So I think Rocky is one of the few guys that actually retired when he should have. And I think if you push it past where he was, because if you remember, if you've ever seen the film of the Don Cockle fight, or Cockell, whatever they called that guy, Cockell was not very good. But he actually gave Marciano a few problems in the first half of that fight. I just think Rocky's back was shot. I think he didn't want to do it anymore. So I think when you look at it, it's what would a prime Marciano do against all these guys? He would knock them all out. Now, prime Marciano against prime Liston, that's a fight I would like to see, because I think, once again, that will wins out. And I think Rocky Marciano is one of the most underrated fighters of all time, because you beat Ezra Charles by decision and then you split his nose in half and knock him out. I don't care when it is, then you're a hell of a fighter, because Ezra Charles is better than 99% of the guys that have ever done it.
Well, yeah, he gets flack for the age of Joe Louis and Archie Moore and Ezra Charles. And
Joe Louis was the favorite going into the fight with Rocky Marciano.
Right. Well, yeah. I think there was a struggle with Marciano on the way up, and it's funny. What a lot of people don't realize, when Joe Louis was making a comeback, he actually fought a good number of top 10 guys as he was making his comeback, and I think he fought like hell, I'd have to go check again, but I think it was like 4 of them in like a 6-month span. Or
yeah, I think
like
Agramani was the best one he fought, wasn't it? Because I know I've got video on that fight, and Agramani was supposed to be a pretty good up-and-coming fighter, and he beat him also. That's why the fight was either like even money, or Lewis was a slight favorite, I think, when they fought. I'm not 100% sure, but I know it wasn't like a 7-1 or 8-1 dog.
No. Well, what I think is, Lewis was the favorite in that fight, and I think a lot of times we get ahead of ourselves because we're like, oh well, obviously Marciano should have been the favorite, but you got to think of the times too. Marciano had a split decision win. Not long before that, he hadn't really beat anybody of note. And again, Lewis came back and he was already beating top 10 guys. Obviously he wasn't starching them, badly like he was doing in his prime. But again, Lewis was still looked at as being serviceable. And the fact that he was able to beat top 10 guys tells you just that. So it's easy to kind of look back on history and be like, oh, well, it's pretty obvious. But the other thing is that Charles, Walcott, Lewis, all these guys were, Archie Moore, most of these guys were his top contender. He just wasn't cherry picking, bottom level top 10 guys. He was fighting the best guys available, and he was coming out on top. And after, 5 hard fights against, both Charles, Walcott 2 times, and the second Walcott fight wasn't as much of a war. But the guy still fought the best available opposition. And you could say, again, these guys were all there past their prime. That's fine. But they were still damn good, and they were still the best available that he had.
Yeah, and when you look at Ezra Charles after the Marciano fight, he beats Charlie Norkus, who was a solid guy. But then he fought Tommy Jackson twice a year after Marciano, and both of those fights were close. And Tommy Jackson was the guy that was ranked number one, I think, when Marciano retired.
Yeah, yeah, and again, I mean, the only person I think you can say that Marciano missed was, maybe Nino Valdez, but I think Valdez was even. I think even Valdez was beaten by Archie Moore. Maybe I'm not big on Valdez either, but maybe you could say that there'd be some style issues there. But I mean, really, Marciano fought everybody that he should have fought, and he overcame them.
Yeah, he beat everybody he had to beat, and there's a lot to be said for that. And I mean, even Archie Moore, when he beats Archie Moore, he gets off the canvas to come back and beat him. So, and yes, Archie Moore did beat Nino Valdez. He beat him by a unanimous decision in Las Vegas. Actually, he beat him twice by unanimous decision. So that right there should tell you something. But let's face it. I mean, Rocky Marciano is basically underrated because he's white. And that's the joke you always hear. And it's just the way it is. But he beat Jersey Joe Walcott, who, say what you will about Walcott's age, Walcott was better at 37 than he was at 27. He'd won the heavyweight title. Ezzard Charles was a great fighter. He may have been at the end of his career also. But the thing you give Marciano is nobody ever beat him. He overcame getting his ass kicked during fights to come back and win. That's something a guy like Mike Tyson has never done.
Right. Yeah, no, again, there's something to be said all that. I mean, because a lot of times there are question marks surrounding a guy's career, like, oh, well, it would have been nice to see Mike Tyson fight George Foreman, or it would have been nice to see Frazier fight Norton, or, a number of these things. But with Marciano, you can't really say that. I mean, again, besides, I think Valdez, I mean, there's really nobody you can look at and say, hey, he should have fought him. It was a must. It was a miss. No, he got who he needed to get, and he got out of there in a timely fashion. And you got to commend him for it. I mean, like you said, a lot of guys just keep on, longer than they should. I mean, Lennox Lewis is another guy that got out at the right time, but Marciano got it done, and I think he's rightly deserving of a top 10 placement all time at heavyweight.
Yeah, with heavyweight champions, the only ones I really remember getting out at the right time were probably those two, Lennox Lewis and Rocky Marciano.
Gene Tunney, probably.
Yeah, Gene Tunney. But I don't know that Tunney really had anybody left to fight that he could have made a lot of money from, because I don't think Tunney was a big seller back then anyways of tickets, was he? And, I mean, what are you going to do, put him against Sharkey?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, I'd have to look at. So actually, on our website, you can go check this out too. But somebody wondered. They wrote an entire article about who Tunney may have fought had he kept going, and it would have been eventually. It would have been the Sharkies, the Schmellings, the Max Bears, those guys. Initially it was pretty weak. When he retired. But there were a number of guys on the horizon who eventually went into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, but the problem is, if I remember right, that was all 3, 4, 5 years later, and he would have been on the downside, so why wait for that?
No, again, and that's why I think Tunney got out at the right time. I mean, and a lot of it is about perception. I mean, obviously Tunney was a great fighter, but again, a lot of this is about perception. I mean, had, James J. Jeffries, right? Had he retired undefeated, not come back for the Jack Johnson fight, he would be looked at in a more positive
He
light.
would be listed by a lot of people as a top 10 heavyweight of all time.
Yep, well, you would hear his name alongside Rocky Marciano a lot more because there's some similarities there. I mean, I think Jeffries was overall a bit more athletic, but he was a rough and tumble guy, kind of relied on his strength, had a good punch. He wasn't a smooth stylist like Clay or a number of these other guys. So, but yeah, again, a lot of it's about perception. Had he never come back and got that loss against Jack Johnson, he would have been undefeated, and you'd hear his name a lot more often, right? But yeah, some of these guys either lingered lingered too much, and now their reputation has been hurt by it, or they got out too early, and maybe they're bloated in a sense, or maybe they're rated just right. It just depends on the person, but yeah, I mean, I'm just saying a lot of this is about perception.
Yeah, and when you look at it, Marciano didn't really have any big fish to fry when he retired. And Lennox Lewis, you could have had a rematch with Vitaly Klitschko, but that's about the only thing that was left for him to do, too.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. I would have loved to have seen a rematch against Vitaly Klitschko, but I can't blame the guy at all. Not a bit. Vitaly, to me, again, everybody talks about how Lennox Lewis was past his best, and maybe he didn't prepare right. Well, to me, that was also a fairly green Vitaly Klitschko. I do think that he went on to become better. He got a little bit more savvy. To me, I would have loved to have seen the rematch, but again, I don't blame Lennox Lewis at all for getting out at that time.
I don't blame him because of this. If you remember at the time, Kirk Johnson was his mandatory, and he accepted a Klitschko fight on 2 weeks' notice after preparing for Kirk Johnson, who was an entirely different styles matchup than what Vitaly Klitschko was. So the fact that Lewis would even take that fight, do you think a Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua would, on 2 weeks' notice, agree to fight a guy like Vitaly Klitschko?
No, and it's funny. It's funny as looking at the '90s, like it's the '90s or the early 2000s, like it's like even anywhere near like a golden period, But no, I don't think any of these guys would. They're just, again, I'm not saying all these fighters are prima donnas anymore, but it's just so tailor made for the guys, pulling the strings anymore. That no, none of these guys are going to do
that.
Well,
on the bright side, 20 years ago, Freza Kendo was ranked number 3 in the world, and 20 years later, he still is.
That's why he belongs in the Hall of Fame. That's why he needs to get in.
You know what? They may have to put him in because of lawsuits. But all right, anything else you want to talk about before we check out tonight?
No, I haven't seen anything in the news that I found particularly interesting. So, yeah, I don't really got anything, man.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. We will be back tomorrow night. We're going to start talking a little more Spence-Garcia over the next 2 nights leading up to Saturday night's fight. And we're going to do a show after Spence-Garcia?
Yeah. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. Hell, it is a fairly big fight. And we don't get them very often, so it'd give us something to talk about maybe. And I'm sure whoever wins the fight, John Einrein and Hal Furls, haven't scored for the other guy. All right, guys, we're going to wrap the show up. Yeah, John, that was a shot at you, but I found out John doesn't really listen, so I can say whatever I want about him. But remember, go to iTunes, give us a like, give us a comment, follow Jeremiah at TGTN Boxing. If you have any questions, you can send a message to him there. You can follow me at Grueling Truth. And make sure you check out all of our shows. The Sheridan Sports Report, brought to you by MyBookie.ag. And remember, with MyBookie.ag, you can click on the banner at the top of the GruelingTruth.net and get up to a $1,000 cash bonus on your first deposit. Also, definitely go check out the Retired Boxers Foundation with Alex and Jackie. They do a great job there. You can find them on Facebook. So we're going to wrap it up for tonight. We will be back tomorrow night at 11 o'clock Eastern with another episode of Inside Boxing Daily. You can hear all of our shows on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, YouTube. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.